The rain drummed relentlessly against the windshield of the patrol car. It was just past 2 in the morning, and the suburban neighborhood on the edge of town had long since surrendered to sleep. Officer Thomas had been dispatched to this weathered 2-story house, following a report of an unsettling, prolonged quiet. Neighbors hadn't heard any shouting, but a bizarre, low-frequency hum vibrating from the property had driven them to call it in. Thomas cut the engine and took a slow, grounding breath. The radio, clipped to his shoulder, suddenly crackled to life. "Officer Thomas, what's your status?" Thomas unclipped the mic, keeping his eyes locked on the house. "Arrived at the scene. Perimeter appears quiet. No visible movement. I'm moving in to inspect." He stepped out of the car, a sharp, biting wind instantly hitting his face. Heavy tactical flashlight in hand, he approached the warped wooden front door. It was resting slightly ajar, almost as if someone had left it that way on purpose. Thomas instinctively rested his right hand on the grip of his holstered sidearm. Every step he took seemed punctuated by the low rumble of distant thunder. He crossed the threshold. The interior of the house was suffocatingly dark and cast in deep shadows. A heavy metallic stench mixed with the odor of decay hung thick in the air. Thomas swept his flashlight beam across the walls and the floorboards. Nothing. But as he advanced, a wet glint caught the edge of the beam. He angled the light straight down. It was a trail of fresh, viscous blood, tracking across the hallway and leading directly into the first-floor bathroom. His pulse quickened. He quietly keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Thomas. I have a fresh blood trail inside the residence, requesting immediate backup. Repeat, send backup to my location." Releasing the button, he drew his firearm, holding the weapon and the flashlight in a crossed tactical grip. He followed the crimson trail. The bathroom door was half open. The blood led straight behind the heavy, opaque shower curtain. Thomas stepped into the room, held his breath, and in one swift, violent motion, ripped the curtain aside. The tub was completely empty. No body, no suspect, only fresh blood pooling on the white porcelain, draining slowly down the plug hole as if the source had vanished right through the pipes. But where had it all come from? Thomas's mind raced as it tried to analyze the scene. Just then, a warm, heavy drop of liquid fell from above, landing squarely on the back of his hand. He slowly tilted his flashlight upward. There, seeping through the gaps of the old wooden ceiling panels, dark blood was dripping down. The real horror wasn't here. It was upstairs, on the second floor. Thomas knew he should retreat, get outside, and wait for his backup. However, a muffled, wet, crunching sound echoing from above froze him in his tracks. If there was someone still alive up there, someone desperately needing assistance, his duty as an officer wouldn't let him walk away. Holding his breath, he began to ascend the creaking wooden staircase, his heartbeat thumping like a bass drum in his ears. The second-floor hallway was even darker, swallowed by an oppressive gloom. The stench here was near overwhelming. At the far end of the hall, a door hung precariously from its rusted hinges. The sound was coming from inside that room. Thomas approached the doorway, casting a sliver of light through the gap. The room was mostly barren, stripped down to ancient furniture and a massive object covered by a heavy black tarp in the far corner. He stepped inside, his boots sticking slightly to the blood-slicked floor. Leveling his firearm, he advanced toward the tarp. Beneath the fabric, a low, guttural gnawing sound vibrated. Thomas reached out with his left hand, grabbed the edge of the tarp, and yanked it away. Underneath stood a massive, rusted iron cage, but it didn't contain an animal. Amidst scattered, unrecognizable remains sat a nightmare. The creature possessed a vaguely human silhouette, but its skin was entirely raw and peeled back, and its eyes burned with a fierce crimson light. It sat huddled on the floor, savagely gnawing on a bone. As the flashlight beam hit its face, the creature froze. It slowly turned its head toward Thomas, dark, thick blood pooling from its maw. Thomas stood paralyzed. He had seen the worst of humanity throughout his career, but the entity before him did not belong to this world. The creature stood up, towering well over any ordinary man, its elongated arms ending in razor-sharp, blade-like claws. The cage door, its heavy chains shattered, swung wide open. The creature unleashed a deafening, unearthly roar that shattered the remaining glass in the window panes. Snapping out of his paralysis, Thomas squeezed the trigger. Crack! 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 3 rounds struck the entity dead center in the chest, but it didn't drop. It merely roared louder, fueled by a rage that seemed to ignore the pain, and launched itself at him. Thomas threw himself to the side, but a sweeping strike from the creature's massive arm caught his shoulder, throwing him violently against the wall. The flashlight flew from his grip, rolling across the floorboards. The room plunged into near total darkness, save for the erratic beam on the floor, casting monstrous, dancing shadows against the wall. Thomas hit the ground hard, his head spinning as a searing pain radiated from his shoulder. In the pitch black, he could hear the heavy, deliberate thud of the creature's footsteps and its raspy, wet breathing. It wasn't rushing. It knew its prey was cornered. Scrambling in the dark, Thomas's fingers found the grip of his gun. He tried to push himself up against the wall, just as his shoulder radio blared again. "Thomas, backup is 5 minutes out. Do you copy?" The sudden burst of audio shattered the silence, and the creature lunged directly toward the sound. Firing blindly at the approaching shadow, Thomas squeezed off 2 more rounds. One must have clipped the creature's face because it shrieked, a high-pitched, agonizing wail, and recoiled into the dark. Seizing the fleeting second, Thomas bolted from the room and into the hallway. He lunged for the stairs, but his boots slipped on the bloody residue tracked from the room. He went airborne, tumbling violently down the wooden steps. By some miracle, his grip held onto his firearm as he crashed onto the first-floor floorboards. Battling a wave of intense dizziness and a bruised body, he forced himself back up. He looked back. At the top of the stairs, a massive, spindly silhouette appeared. It dropped onto all fours, descending the staircase with the terrifying, rapid agility of a massive spider, its crimson eyes locked onto him. Thomas ran for the front door. He grabbed the brass handle and threw his weight into it. It didn't budge. The deadbolt had jammed in the frame. He frantically clawed at the lock, but the rusted mechanism refused to turn. Behind him, the icy breath of the creature was closing in. Spinning around, Thomas backed against the door and leveled his gun. He had exactly 1 round left in the chamber. The creature stopped just a few feet away, letting out a low, triumphant hiss as it raised its clawed hand for a killing blow. Black fluid oozed from the bullet holes in its chest, a grim testament to its unnatural resilience. Thomas accepted that these were his final moments, but he refused to go down without a fight. He aligned his sight directly with the glowing red orb of the creature's left eye. "See you in hell," he whispered. Before his finger could pull the trigger, The world outside exploded in a blinding flash of red and blue emergency lights, accompanied by the wail of approaching sirens. As the intense strobe lights pierced through the front windows, the creature shrieked in absolute agony. Blindingly shielding its face with its massive arms, it recoiled away from the light, retreating back into the pitch-black hallway. An instant later, the sound of slamming car doors and shouting officers echoed from the driveway. The front door was violently breached, splintering inward as 5 heavily armed officers flooded the entryway, their high-powered tactical lights illuminating the entire house. "Thomas, you all right? What happened here?" shouted his partner, John, hauling him up by his good arm. Weakly, Thomas pointed toward the dark interior. "In the back! Upstairs! Watch yourselves! It's not human!" The tactical team moved in formation, sweeping the hallway and clearing the rooms. They discovered the second-floor room, the shattered cage, and the horrific crime scene. But after a thorough search of the entire property, the creature was nowhere to be found. It had seemingly vanished into thin air. Only the thick black fluid on the walls and the deep, jagged claw marks on Thomas's shoulder remained to prove that the nightmare had been entirely real. As they loaded Thomas into the back of the ambulance, he looked out the window, his eyes drifting up to the dark, broken window of the second floor. There, buried deep within the shadows, he thought he saw a pair of glowing crimson eyes staring back down at him, narrowing into a cruel, silent grin. The house, along with whatever malice dwelt within it, swallowed the light and dissolved back into the night.